You're listening to the Good for Business podcast, where we feature interviews, tips, and tricks from owners, operators, and innovators throughout Mississippi and around the world. And now, your host, Colin Krieger. Welcome to this week's episode of the Good for Business podcast, live from the Catfish Alley podcast studios. My guest today is one of my oldest friends from Columbus, Mississippi, Sonic Johnson. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, sir. Glad to be here.
As we always start off with, go ahead and give me your quick pedigree information.
Pedigree information. God-given name Rick Johnson, known as Sonic. And I hail from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This is the longest I've lived anywhere in my life, in Caledonia, Mississippi. Moved here in July 5th of 2000.
So you're almost from here. I'm a little shy of 20 years, but as little old ladies in front of big white houses tell me all the time, you're not from here.
You're not from here. And I remember meeting you because my wife's from New Orleans.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And that's where you guys came up here to camp for a weekend when a little blow came through.
Yeah, right when Katrina came through. Again, 20 years ago. And
yeah,
I think we moved in the first week of September. And I met you during my formative years with Papa John's, and we were trying to figure out how to get onto the Air Force Base. So let's start with the origin story of little bitty Sonic, little Ricky, running around the streets. Would it be in Baton Rouge, Louisiana?
No, I was actually born up in northern Ohio, 26 miles east of Cleveland on Lake Erie. And we moved to Baton Rouge when I was in probably ninth grade, I think. And then that's kind of where I'm from.
Kind of where you're from?
Everything before there. I'm one of six children. And three of us made the trip south. The other three stayed wherever. And so that's kind of where I went to school in all-boys school, Catholic school in Baton Rouge, Catholic High. And then I went on to go to the Louisiana State University. And that's where I met my wife of 43 years. And two children, two daughters. One's lives in Germantown. Matter of fact, she's the engineer for the city of Germantown, civil engineer. And my youngest daughter, Dr. Monica Johnson, teaches at Southeastern Louisiana University in Hammond, Louisiana.
There you go. What was the first job you ever had as a child?
Yeah, let's think about that. I mowed lawns, had a bike, carried a lawnmower behind my bike.
Yeah.
And my prized customers were ones that I got to use their gas, or B, I got to use their riding lawnmower. Wow, way cool.
Yeah.
So that's what, and then they started building a 4-lane highway right towards the end of our street. And man, I'd go there and just rake up all the Coke bottles for a nickel a piece, man. I was living large as I bought my gas.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then my first big boy job really was working as a short order cook at a country club back in Ohio. Top of a hill, riding a bike there and back. About 5-mile ride. Then when I moved to Louisiana, all contacts lost. I mean, it was tough to do. And
yeah, it's a tough time too at 13 or 14 years old.
Yeah, I think. But it was my next door neighbor built swimming pools and built our pool, as a matter of fact, for my dad. And I just remember I was bugging, hey, summer, drug back, weak mind, man, I'm ready to go. And one Saturday, his hair was on fire because it was raining. He needed something covered. And he says, Rick, let's roll. And spent the day with him. And he's like, what are you doing Monday? So that's how I started building swimming pools with him for a long time. Did most of his plumbing. I could make water run uphill, pouring concrete grades. And then I started my own. And that's how I put myself through college, building swimming pools. And I built a swimming pool for the colonel who ran the ROTC detachment at LSU. And he'd ask my guy, he says, where's Rick go? He comes here in the morning, gets you all started, disappears, comes back, before lunch and gets at it. And he goes, oh, he's in college. He goes, really? So he talked to me and he goes, hey, you ever think about going into the Air Force? At the time, I'm at the bottom of an 8-foot hole, August.
In Louisiana.
Slinging Louisiana gumbo mud, which weighs 150 pounds per shovelful. And I'm just thinking, this is not where I want to grow old. He goes, "Yeah, we go fly airplanes? I got an airplane. Let's go fly this weekend." I go, "Dude, I'm in." He goes, "Man, you got leadership. You got 30 and 40-year-old guys working for you, and they call you sir, and you're just a young 22-year-old guy, right?" I said, "Dude, pay them every Friday. Once a year, got to put a shovel upside one of their head. Other than that, that's all you want to do. And I'll ask them to do anything I wouldn't do myself." So there you go. So long story short, he goes, "Easy A for this ROTC thing," and my GPA needed that because struggling being a part-time student as an engineering student.
You were an engineering student. So.
Yeah. That lasted 2.5 years, and then it was pretty neat. Is that man who commissioned me on December 19th, 1981, came back here to Columbus, Mississippi, and June 24th of 2004 retired me from active duty in the Air Force after 23 years.
Well, that was great. What was your, tell me about some of the duty stations or your first week in it? Because like our podcast is about what's good for business, which is entrepreneurship, which you are now, but everybody takes a different path there. Now, the only thing that is absolutely been true of everyone that's been on so far is they've had to stop in the restaurant business or food service, and of course, usually there's
short order cook. I was there.
and then a lot of them have the hot, sweaty job outside too. And those two things, even if it may not lead to entrepreneurship at a young age, at an older age, it leads you to, I don't want to do that, So
well, and that's same. You actually use that line in leadership because everybody wants to work for a great leader. No one wanted to work for me, but my philosophy always is you get great leadership lessons from bad leaders. I mean, like you said, I'll never do that. I'll never say that. I'll never work like that. And it's the same with JOBs. You say, okay, this is what I don't want to do. That's as valuable as finding, hey, this is what I want to do. If you're lucky enough to fall on that, your first job, but you don't really do. But that's also what's cool about the Air Force. Every 3 years, you got a new job. Whether you liked it or not, landscape changed. I moved 13 times. That wears on you. That's probably the biggest stress in our marriage was moving. Because being from New Orleans, my wife had this great grandmother's pride, blah blah blah, and it was arrived at the next destination broken. She's like, "Really, dude?"
Yeah. Where is she from? She from New Orleans proper, as they say?
Yeah, she's a Dominican girl.
Okay.
All girls.
Dominican, by the way, it's a high school, not Dominican.
Right,
like a
all
Dominican
girls.
girl.
All girls.
You have to clarify because once Baton Rouge is like that too. I know we played football against Catholic, and anybody from New Orleans knows generally the culture down there. And whenever I run into somebody from there, they say where you went to school. They don't care if you went to Berkeley or the Air Force Academy. They mean where you went to high school. And those Dominican girls were something else. So,
indeed.
And where was your first station at the Air Force?
I was stationed in kind of an interesting story before we get to there is I commissioned in December, and at the time the Air Force would call you, when they were ready for you.
What year was this, might I ask?
1981.
Okay.
And then, so I was supposed to go on active duty in June of 1982. So now you're sitting right. No one wants to hire you. You're not in your insurance health care plan anymore for your parents because you're not a full-time student. So anyway, I ended up being a bartender and assistant food and beverage manager for a hotel in downtown Baton Rouge, right around the corner from the Louisiana legislature. And wife and I are going to get married May 21st. Change one of my orders. Now you're going to report to the Air Force on, May 19th. So luckily, just venue changes and all that. That was pretty good. And so basically, about the third change, for my wedding on May 7th, the hand-printed invitations, whatever, had this stupid little change one because of the Air Force. It's really not the 14th like it says on the invitation. So my mother-in-law really hated the Air Force for a long time, ruining her daughter's wedding. So I got married on Friday and left for the Air Force on Monday. And honeymooned in the French Quarter, took her car. See you, honey. She had 2 more weeks of LSU before she graduated, and then joined me in Enid, Oklahoma for pilot training.
There you go. That's almost like a honeymoon.
It just didn't matter. We were just struggling.
Yeah.
And they wrecked the ballet wrecked her car, parking it. And so you come out and have to deal with that. It's like, welcome to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And yeah. I stayed on at Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma for a long tour. I became a T-38 instructor pilot after I graduated from pilot training. I did that for another 3 years. First child born in Enid, Oklahoma. And then and Enid is just Columbus, just not with the same level of community support, of course, but it's right down small town. We're a noisy, rambunctious enterprise, and so they don't put us in populous places. So
Yeah.
And just much like you take your child when you first teach them to drive, you take them to the Caledonia School parking lot or Walmart parking lot in the middle of the night where there's nothing to bump into. Same with pilot training students. We need a lot of space to stress out and let them make mistakes so not bump into anybody. After that, I got a C-130 assignment as a fighter guy, and I was pretty angry. I was like, propellers? That's for the Navy. I was not a happy man when I got that assignment. And all of a sudden, these C-130 guys were coming out of the woodwork saying, Sonic, I wasn't Sonic yet, Rick, you will do well. You will love this. And sure enough, I tell most of the young lieutenants I've interacted with was, you get to this thing that I call ADP, Airline Decision Point. And you decide whether you want to continue in a military flying career or go to an airline and do that. And it's one of the reasons why we have the safest airlines business going is because
best training.
You have a lot of not only the Air Force but the Navy and the Marine Corps all contribute pilots to the airline enterprise, and we can't keep them all. I mean, we can only promote so many, so it's not that big a deal. But still, lately, and so I'm flying a C-130. I've landed on a glacier. I landed on the beach. I've airdropped hay to bison in Yellowstone National Park when they were starving. And I'm like, this is pretty fun. This is pretty cool. Been on every continent but Antarctica and was halfway there and I got turned around in Malaysia. So it was pretty exciting. It was great, exciting aviation. Loved it. Had 4 different flying assignments and 4 different airplanes and flying time in 6. I love what I was doing. I just, golly, they're paying me to do this. It's fun. Yep. So after my Oklahoma one, I got my C-130. I went to Little Rock Air Force Base, Arkansas, child number 2 born there. And after deployed when that's my youngest daughter. I deployed when she was 5 days old, and came back. She had hair.
So far you're 2 for 2 on any major life things happen. You leave a few days later.
Yeah, run like heck.
Yeah, get out of there.
Now that was fun, but the thing was, our children are 16 months apart, and so carrying that second child kind of low, and they'll know all the female physiology, but it's painful when it's riding on their cervix, and so my wife was bedridden for the last 4 to 6 weeks of her pregnancy, so I didn't fly many missions. Being a pilot home is like where you're from when you go to work, and you come back a week or 2 later.
Yeah,
and so the Air Force is good. Just let me fly local training missions for a lot of guys, and so my oldest daughter and I was Mr. Mom. I bathed her, did all the good stuff, and when I left, and then that's what I really missed when I was gone. I didn't know the little blob that popped out 5 days ago, and I left. I just know she went into the hospital naming the child something and came out Monica. It was not the name we went into the hospital with, so. But I missed my older daughter because we were joined at the hip. And I can remember coming back. I flew back into New Orleans after my deployment. My mom, she went home to hang with her mom and dad. And I just couldn't wait to see my Jennifer and get to the airport, and she didn't want anything to do with me. I mean, she was like, and then the breaks, I just like, you're looking for this, child running down the tarn, down the raceway, jumping in my arms, Daddy, I miss you. She's like, here you, chopped liver, dude. Wouldn't come out of my mother-in-law's.
How old was she then?
Yeah, 16, 17 months, 18 months.
Oh.
Just under 2. And then what really broke your heart is when a Delta pilot walked by and she points, Daddy, Daddy. I'm like, dude. So it wasn't to the ride home from the airport to my in-laws' house that she crawled out of my wife's arms and crawled across the street and got in my lap and gave me a little hug. But that was not the reunion I had envisioned for for my welcome back. But it's good.
That's part of the sacrifice that people don't realize. I've gotten to speak at the last couple pilot graduations, and that's what I talk about, is that you don't quite realize it unless you're reminded of it all the time, about how much time away from family they're spending. Like, everybody always alludes to all the military moves that people do. And then when they hear, I used to be the same way when I'd meet people and they're like 42 years old and they're like, I'm retired. And I'm like, well, golly gee, isn't that great? And then you start to hear and learn and know better the amount of sacrifices they've made in their life to somewhat retire, not really retire, but somewhat retire.
Well, that is a lot of it. And I spent a total of 37 years in the Air Force, between 23 years of active duty and 14 and some high change as the public affairs civilian. I was the first officer to get hired in civil service. Because prior to the legislation change in 2003, that as a commissioned officer, you can only receive one source of federal income. So when I draw Social Security, my Air Force retirement goes down by how much I pull Social Security.
Yeah.
So if I'd go work for the FAA or for the Department of the Air Force, or you fill in the blank, my retirement goes down what they pay me. So next thing you know, you're working for nothing. No one whines about officers' pay. No one gives much sympathy for that. But it's really rough on widows, because they get 55% of our pay. And now when that disappears, that's kind of harsh to them. And that's what was the driving force for the congressional legislation to change that law. And then they needed rated expertise. So if they need a lot of pilot rated, there's a lot of people, air traffic controllers, aircraft maintainers, and if they're officers, they have to go to a contractor. So there's a middleman between you and the Air Force. So they would pay and that's how we preserve pay. But it wasn't the Air Force. The government's paying a lot more money than it really needed to. So that's why they fixed it. So anyways, so my 37 years was quite a career. But for my first year, I cooked breakfast for my wife every morning that she wanted it, to say thank you to her, because especially being a pilot too, because there's a bazillion other people in the Air Force who do a bazillion other really cool, hard, unrecognized things. Pilots are always out front, and our wives are the ones back keeping the washing machine running, the flat tire that you can't fix for them, and because everything goes wrong as soon as you leave the continent of the United States of America. Things go wrong. So that was my way of saying thanks to her for being a great wingman and mom for my kids.
There you go. Where does Sonic come from?
Well, I earned it the old-fashioned way. Get call sign in the Air Force typically because, I remember this one guy, his name was Kresge, his last name was Kresge, and so guess what his call sign was? Kmart. Okay, so, I was actually, back in the day, I was a public affairs guy's worst nightmare, because we went a little fast, a little low, broke a little glass. And I just got my C-130 assignment too, so they really just say, like, yeah, you'll never go supersonic again. Now we know why. So, and you get your nickname based on something you just rather everybody forget.
Yeah.
They forget about that, man. And it wasn't me. It was actually my wingman trying to catch up to me. And but it's still your fault as a flight lead. And it was just like, so you want it to go away, don't. So Sonic stuck. And it stuck with me, and it was really, now fast forward, my last flying assignment in the Air Force was being a T1 instructor pilot back here. And Sonic was just a great way to, I crawl in an airplane next to a lieutenant, they look at the lieutenant colonel, and they're just, they're scared to death, And Sonic, just had a way of putting everybody at ease. And let's go out and do the JOB. Let's learn some things. Matter of fact, I'm going to tell you, you're going to screw these two things up today. Let's get them out of the way early in the sortie, and then we can have fun and show you what a cool job this is, So it became very effective. And I moved here in January of 2000, and my family stayed in Montgomery, Alabama, till they finished the school year out. So I was kind of bachelor. So I spoke a lot. I would go down and do the wing mission briefing for the base when they needed a speaker, and Sonic became a really easy name for everybody to remember, and it became really, really easy because there's 1,000 Johnsons, and there's like 3 Sonics, as including the 2 restaurants in town.
And so when you came back here, how did the decision come to? Did you go directly into public relations from being a T1 instructor?
No, and it was kind of an interesting path as well for 2 reasons. One is I worked in a think tank, and this will lead into what I do now. But I worked in a think tank where every day I went to work was 10 years in the future. Retina scan to get in. I had freaking bazillion computers on my desk and did classified wargaming. And I was the mobility expert and the logistics expert. And we had a funding stream that came directly from the chief of staff of the Air Force, the 4-star, the guy who runs the things that we all call sir. And he, at the time, the Air Force had 5 core values. And General Fogman said, I wouldn't remember, it's 5. 3. The magic thing is 3. You give a briefing in the Air Force, you'll see there's always 3 main points.
Yeah.
Never 4, never 2, 3. So my job was to distill those down and not lose anything because they're all relevant. But so that's how I got to know General Fogman real well. And my current boss was a guy named Mark Welsh, who went on to be the chief of staff of the Air Force as well, and he was a colonel. And so he comes on, and he's giving me my feedback as an officer. You get that every year about keep your feet off the seats and how come you do this. And he takes out this napkin, may have come from a bar, and it's got, Mark, get Sonic back in the cockpit, any aircraft he wants, Ron. He goes, what am I supposed to do about this? Seems pretty clear to me, sir. This was a staff job, and we like flying airplanes. He says, all right, what do you want to do? Like, the Air Force has never asked me what airplane I wanted to fly. It was always, this is what we think you ought to do. Oh, yes, sir. Can I have a day to think about it? I got to talk to Dee to figure out, holy cow, didn't see this one coming at all. And, now, frustrated fighter guy, flow mobility, my whole thought. And I'm like, that's my chance to get back in the fighter, man. Let's go try that. Strike Eagle seems like a pretty cool. Dude, you're 45 freaking years old, man. Your back's going to hurt. And I go, I'm used to flying with my golf clubs. I mean, wait a minute. Let's rethink this thing. And I stepped back professionally and looked as in we were at a stop loss where we refused. Pilots had to be a year. If you want to get out of the Air Force, you have a year's notice. And you had to stick around for another year. And they usually grounded you to do a non-flying job that no one wanted to do because you weren't flying anymore. And I just looked at it. No one wanted to be Air Force pilots because this is not a lifestyle that I wanted to do. And I thought it went back to pilot training because we're not telling kids the hard stuff. It's kumbaya, let's all hands skip, this is great, blah, blah. Let me tell you, it's like being in the middle of Africa in the middle of the night, not knowing where to go. Anyway, so I said, I'm going to go back and be a flight instructor to influence that next generation of young men and women. And so that's what I did. It was let me get a time. My mom was really sick. My dad had cancer. And this is the closest I could get to Baton Rouge and still have an airplane to drive. And so the Air Force was send me to Laughlin to be a commander. And they changed my orders to come here. And the only reason that happened because the Air Force said nope, because it's got to solve a humanitarian's got to solve itself in a very short term. They don't want to keep doing this for a long time. And they weren't terminal. I mean, they weren't. They just required a lot of my attention, a lot of somebody's attention.
Yeah.
And but the guy who was in charge of trainer assignments was the Corps commander at LSU.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm like, hey, how you doing? He just looks at me. He goes, you realize you're getting off the leadership merry-go-round. You get off, you're never gonna get back on. It's your one shot. And I remember I just lamented, prayed, whatever. If my dad knew I did this, he would still. Sorry. Yeah. He would still kick my. Anyways, did the right thing for what was right for my parents. So that's how I got to Columbus, Mississippi. Came here unannounced because I was going to another base, and this all worked out at the last minute. So like December something, I showed up here, and they're like, "Who are you? What are we doing with you?" So I flew T1s as a flight instructor, did that for 4 years, and retired in 2004. And that's when I got hired. I did the public affairs thing as my last 8 months in uniform.
Yeah.
And then I changed that in for a tie, coat and tie. I tell you, it's kind of rough going from 11 pockets to move into like 4. That's good.
I always joke when I ask pilot, especially if they're in uniform and they're looking at houses or something and they're grabbing pens and reaching in other pockets for notebooks. And I'm like, that looks pretty comfy, like I need to get myself a jumpsuit.
Yeah, you spent 23 years with your wallet's always here, your pen's always here, the earplugs are here, and now you got to like wear clothes like this. You're like, what did I do with that?
Well, talk about the transition. It's almost in a business sense. So you go from taking orders to giving orders. I mean, everybody at some level still taking orders in the Air Force, taking orders to giving orders. And then you get into public relations, which, the Air Force isn't necessarily marketing, but there is part of it. But then you're speaking for other people. And correct me if I'm wrong, there's probably a giant rule book of things you're not allowed to say, not allowed to divulge. And of course, that when my formative years, when I met you in late 2005, the base was still kind of on lockdown from 2001. It's still on relative lockdown for at least what I heard before. Was it a big challenge going from being in charge to being in charge of speaking, I guess?
Oh, no. I was seamless, actually, because I did a lot of it before I came here as a bachelor, if you will. And that's what was sort of successful. And a name like Sonic, it's not hard to forget. And then, I ran air shows here. I mean, that's what I did for a living. My last year in the Air Force, I consulted and coordinated and helped with 17 different air shows. So I had a lot of that figured out, how to do it. It's not too hard, And so I always had a public facing role.
Yeah.
But the scarier part is, I was the spokesperson for the wing commander. You don't put him out there all the time. And when I talk, it's not Sonic Johnson's idea. It's your wing commander, you fill in the blank. I work for 13 wing commanders. And the greatest part of my job was my office was right. We had a back alley right to my office between his office and mine. And he'd pop in all the time and vice versa. But I had a 50-yard line seat of the leadership, biggest leadership laboratory that you could ever see. There's always, like right now, the wing commander, Colonel Black, and the deputy commander is Jesper Stubendorf, the deputy commander. And an Air Force tenet is called continuity of command. When Colonel Black leaves, the wing doesn't stop. We've got to make decisions. As Colonel Stubendorf does. He sits in, he makes a decision. He's got to think like the boss. He's got to, breathe like the boss. He's got to get his policies. And there was a decision point made in financing or construction or anything like that. He's prepared just to keep it rolling. So the only thing he can't do is court martial somebody. And thank God for that on my part sometimes. But that's sort of, but watching the dynamic between that leadership team up there was really cool. That was interesting because, Columbus is a gem assignment for leadership. It's got a great reputation of the community support here. And I like to say I had a lot to do with that, is putting it on the radar to say, I remember the first thing I came here, the wing commander said, we're going to change the name of this base. Got to name it after some famous person, like all the other bases are, right?
Yeah.
And I go, sir, it's already named after somebody. He goes, who? Christopher? I go, no. 27,000 people who live in the city of Columbus. And you change the name of their base, you get some hate mail.
Yeah.
And I go, sir, yes, my advice is just give it 6 months. And let's take this up after you're here for 6 months. And sure enough, after 6 months, they go, good advice, Sonic. That would have been a bad idea.
Well, even in the time that I've known you in the last 20 years, when you were there, like it used to be, I'd hear these stories. We were in the 30th or 40th least likely base to want to go to, least likely to retire. And now between the Altus and everything else, like we're constantly in the running, and I have multiple pilots who are starting to retire here now that a couple commanders did, Colonel Sears and some other people. Now they're getting involved with Mississippi State. Colonel Weinstein went over there and worked, and some other guys are
command chiefs going over there right now.
Yeah.
Just retired.
So
Colonel Gosney works out there. So Jay Fisher's in the city government and the county government.
Yeah.
And my motto is, why did I retire here? I was sick of moving. But this is a really great place to raise adult children. I don't know about the little pieces, the little
Yeah.
pea pods, because I did my best to try to help that. But I have experience with my daughters were maybe sixth grade, eighth grade, somewhere in there when they moved here and went to Caledonia. And uh, it's, the senior leaders all come here. They have older children. Our base is young.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like there's like 70% of the people there are on their first assignment in the Air Force. And if they have children, they're still nursing. And so the senior leaders have them, and they're worried about college and young adult stuff. So I did a lot with them and getting them. This is what I know to get the scar tissue I have, or sending my two daughters off to college.
Mine's leaving next week, so the oldest is. So
good luck.
It's happening. Yeah, I was just talking to Josh, who owns the studio here, and he's got 3 little girls. And I said, just from somebody who traveled a lot when my kids were young, and you just mentioned the same thing, and I can hear it in your voice, like you just want to get every minute you can with them when you have them later on.
I can remember when I was leaving Maxwell, Montgomery, Alabama, to come here. I had to go learn how to fly the T1. So I was gone, and my daughters were playing soccer at the time. And my oldest daughter, she's a dainty little thing. She'd run down the soccer field, very prim and proper. She was a dancer, she'd ballet and all that. I'd go off, and one weekend I got to fly home into T1 as part of the training, and we went to Maxwell with the instructor I was with, and she was playing indoor soccer. Never heard of such a thing. So I go there and I watch this indoor soccer game, and this is 3 months of not seeing my girl play soccer. And it's like hockey because they can bounce the ball off the rail. Okay, so it's pretty cool. But she's got this girl up against the wall, duking it out with her feet, whatever. And I go, no dainty hands. I'm like, giddy up, man.
If you haven't watched girls' high school soccer and college soccer, it is rough. The young ladies over at the W here, some ladies up on the field. My daughters, the older they got, I was like, there's some vengeful stuff,
Yeah, I was actually a professional soccer coach. I was the assistant coach for Caledonia girls soccer team. That's how I will spend hours for your kid.
Yeah.
And my kids get what's left over. So now this was one of my strategies to spend time, tangentially with my children.
Yeah.
Dude, what'd you do that for? Every time we get home or whatever. But I kept eye on their nutrition is what I was really worried about. But, she was scouted by Auburn to go play soccer for them. And I don't know, it was New Hope, Caledonia New Hope soccer game. She got slide tackle and tore her ACL, and that soccer career's over with. So she ended up being the valedictorian, so it kind of worked out okay.
Yeah, you finished that all right there. Well, how do you transition from that? We're going to go into the plugging part of the show. Talked about the transition from being a PR guy to your current entrepreneurship journey, as they say.
Okay. Going back to that think tank I worked in, General Fogelman would come down and he would give us these hard things to solve. For instance, they're probably working on the Gaza thing and the Ukraine thing. We had now all the different ways of doing it, and he just came down and he goes, "The medics ain't really involved in this North Korea fight thing, And he goes, "Trying to figure out something I can do, get a war game that the medical corps can participate in." Like, okay. So I realized that every year, and now and then, for 44 still years, I still get a flu shot. Why don't we get a flu shot? I start peeling all that back, and it's a pretty cool weapon. There are nations that have flu weapons, and while it doesn't kill you, it takes you out. And if I get sick, come out of the battlefield, someone's got to replace me. There's 3 people taking care of me, so it's like a 4-to-1. And you're not really a bad country because I didn't kill me. It just made me sick, right? So I started studying virology and infectious diseases, and so that's what I did. I did a flu war game. It scared me. I was like, wow, this stuff kills people on the end of the spectrum, young and old, but the middle people are pretty well protected. We're resilient enough to bounce back from the flu. Yeah. And anyway, so long story short, 2006, in Columbus, Mississippi, Columbus had not only they first had the equine pandemic, and then we had a flu pandemic, and we didn't have enough instructor pilots or student pilots healthy enough to fill our flying schedule.
At either the or second busiest training base in the country, depending on the year, right?
That's correct. Depending on how you count. That's right. And so I look back and I go, remember this. And just so happens I got a demonstration in Baton Rouge. I went home to go to Mecca to go see a football game or something, and guy gave me a presentation on what the Velara with the active air purification does. And I'm like, this is I need it for my house. Protect your nest, if you will. And then I have my car, protect your transportation, corridor to work, and then try to influence the workplace. So that's how I got into the air purification business, indoor air purification business. What I do was because of that. And the second one is that my wife, bless her heart, she loves dogs, and she rescues dogs, and I'm allergic to dogs. And as a pilot, you can't take allergy medicine,
Yeah.
So I was like, honey, this is a problem. I come home and there'd be 8 dogs in my house. I'm like, who are you? Right? And the air purification takes all that dander out and all that kind of stuff. So that's how we got to peacefully coexist for the last 25 years. Now that's how I got into the air purification business.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so now I know you've come and spoke at my office before. So talk about some product. I think you're going to pull one up here because Catfish Alley Studios has one. They don't have any catfish, but they've got an air purification.
They got them in. He's got them in every room in the studio.
Yeah,
fact,
and you can tell the difference in the air quality in here. I've actually mentioned it before, and he got excited when I mentioned your name that Josh did when you were coming on the show today. So talk a little bit about the mechanics behind it, because you said, I see something around your neck and then you got stuff for your house.
Yeah, this is I don't have to wear a face diaper anymore. This is my mask that I wear over your face. But essentially it's an active system. It's not a filter. It has 3 technologies in the roof, but the biggest thing, it goes out and gets pathogens. It seeks them out. And then it tases them. It basically, the charged hydrogen peroxide or hydroxyl ions come out of that thing. It's a catalytic process that's made out of the humidity in the air. Nothing you have to replace. It's just magic. It makes it happen. And we all know what hydrogen peroxide does on your finger to bad things. Well, now you have this gas running around that it finds a pathogen. The pathogens are viruses, bacteria, molds, and mildew. And we make it all go away actively. So doesn't have to pass through the machine. It goes out and finds it.
Yeah, my mentor, Rebecca Goodell, introduced us in another life for that. And she was using that. She obviously loved some puppy dogs before she moved away.
She did.
And she had some, I need to give her a call. I liked me some Rebecca Goodell. I liked her little theme song, Rebecca Goodell.
Well, let's say hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca Goodell. And Realtor to the stars. And she would put it in her house before she listed her house to get rid of the pet smell. And she even put it in some client stuff. So how many different things on there? There's like the one for the house, the one for your neck. Is there another one for the car?
Oh, we have you name it. I have one in my car. I have one it's really good for mobile homes, campers, and I have them that you actually put in your ductwork in your house for HVAC. I want to do 16,000 square feet. So we go from big spaces, and that's what this company does, big spaces, and Velara is the home space. And so I have 2 different air purification lines I could source to get the right piece of equipment for the job.
So the one you just pulled on the table, does it need to have like hydrogen peroxide put in it so often, or it's all set?
That's the catalytic process.
Okay.
That little thing that was glowing in there, it takes the humidity in the air, oxygen in the air, cracks it, puts it together, and makes it H2O2, which is hydrogen peroxide plasma.
So how is
it? And it doesn't. You can't overdo it. Kind of like ozone, because some of them make ozone, which is really good for when the dog barfs on the floor. Gets rid of that really quick. It's the high. It's the nuclear mode, is what I call it. But it once it gets to 0.02 parts per million, which is 1/50th the OSHA standard for hydrogen peroxide in a work environment for 8 hours, it turns back into moisture and the humidity, and so it's 100% safe for plants, pets, you freaking name it. You can't overdo it, and you don't have unless we get a dry spell. And dry around here is like 80% humidity.
That's what I try.
It works down to 10% humidity.
You had your formative years in Baton Rouge, and I tell people, I was like, it's hot here, and it gets really, really hot here, but not the same way as it did in the swamp in New Orleans and Baton Rouge. Like, we have a few weeks like that, but you can't go to New Orleans right now. Like, today it's relatively pleasant in Lowndes County. The high is 88, and New Orleans is 99 and 99. Like, it's just, I don't know how I survived my younger
Well, I
years.
convinced schooled my family on, you don't look at that number. We got a weather station. I said, you look at the humidity number. And now they have it feels like numbers.
Yeah.
See, in the Air Force, we've had that feels like thing for a long time. We called it the index of thermal stress. And you could, when it got over X degrees, you couldn't do a PT test, you couldn't run. You could only pre-flight one airplane, two airplanes, three airplanes. It limited your outdoor exposure.
Yeah.
Because that's what really is critical is the humidity. And when you're a pilot, you can't wear, really cool wicking type stuff. Anything that touches your skin has got to be made out of man-made material, because you get in a fire, it burns. This will melt into your skin, and 13 surgeries later, they'll be still pulling it out of my skin. So that's why they have that rule. But it's so neat to wear more comfortable technology stuff.
How's the journey been into entrepreneurship? How long have you been doing this? It's been at least 8-9 years that I know of.
Well, I've been over. It's been almost 15, and it's been a lot of fun because the Air Force gave me all kinds of customer service skills, whether it was flying an airplane and one of the leadership things I tell the guys is that if the Air Force teaches you something at work, take it home.
Yeah.
Like, all right, so you wear your seatbelt on the base. As soon as you go out the gate, you take your seatbelt off. Well, that's pretty stupid. No one really does that, right? So why would you do that with, you fill in the blank, hydration, whatever. And we have these things come out every month on safety and things do something. There's one guy picked up his push lawnmower, and used it to trim his hedges, right? And when he turned it on the side, he kind of forgot his fingers would stick out, and the blade caught him, and he cut his fingertips off. We're like, would the Air Force allow you to do that? Nah. Well, why'd you do it at home? So the customer service stuff. So I really want to do it. And I had my first job. Again, I put myself through college in the swimming pools. When I moved to Montgomery, that was my first staff job. So one thing about being a pilot is like weekends and 3-day holidays, it's just noted with no interest because you're flying or you're not flying, which all really mattered. And I had all this time off. And then again, my kids started playing soccer at that age, and I was on the sideline, and people were complaining about their pools in Montgomery, and I was like, oh, I could fix that, next thing you know. So my dad took over the pool business in Baton Rouge when I went into the Air Force. I was kind of backwards, but it worked. And so we just made I made a service company. We incorporated in Alabama as well as a company. And then, so I was servicing pools, and I was flying around the world lecturing, and my wife, my kids, all went and serviced all our clients when I was out doing my thing. But for the most part, I was home, and I would come to your house at night after work, and now you see the pool guy, they'd have a nice cold beverage for me when I showed up, and and I told me, you don't need me. There's 2 tricks I'll teach you, and after that you'll be good to go. If stuff breaks, call me, I'll fix it, because Air Force is paying my house note. I don't really need to charge you. So that was my first endeavor into business and entrepreneurship. That's where I found out I was a terrible bookkeeper. My dad, I'd have to do the books, and he would just sign this due tomorrow. I said, I'll get it to you tomorrow. He goes, no, you get it to me tonight. I can't find 3 cents. He goes, all right, call me at midnight. Dad, it's 3 cents. Here, I'll pull out my pocket, give it to you. Nah, he said, this got to be perfect, So, that was my biggest thing. Is like, I'm really good at the business side of it, but the bookkeeping side of it, it's no fun. No, that was it. So now I have a lot of fun. It's really cool is that when you leave something as actualizing as being an airman in today's Air Force, or yesterday's Air Force, is doing something that's relevant. And, helping people. I help people. If you're doing a cancer chemotherapy and your immune system is compromised, you should have our equipment in your house.
Yeah.
Just to protect yourself as you get through that journey. And helping people where you have this old lady, I was making a deposit in the bank in Caden's Bank, and it comes up and I see someone hugging me in her hand, older hands, and I was like, what is this? She turns around, and I find out she bought one of my machines, and she lived in an assisted living facility, and matter of fact, that one. And she said, my doctor took me off 2 medications for my breathing is so much better. And I go, she's not my mom or not my grandma, but that's somebody's mom or grandma that I help. That's a cool feeling. That's what I like to do.
Well, as we wrap it up here, why don't you give them the direct contact info to reach you for that? And if you want to give a plug for the Air Force and Space Association now, what's the official name?
Air and Space.
Air
Forces
and Space. So plug away on that part of it. How do they reach you?
Cell phone.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to give it out.
Yep, 662-251-7067. You can reach me for either I'm the president of the local chapter of the Air and Space Forces Association, with a professional organization of the Air Force. Not for pilots, not for navigators, but for every airman that goes through. And that helps keep, we're allowed to speak what the Air Force wants. What people when I was in uniform, I couldn't.
Yeah.
And that helps. And then the air purification is the same things. Same phone number, sonic.johnson, number 77 at gmail.com.
Well, good deal. It's been a fun having you in here. Like I said, Sonic was one of the first people I met when I came to Columbus with Papa John's trying to get on the Air Force Base, and he's been a driving force between me getting involved more and more every year with the base, and I can't thank him enough. Thanks for coming here today.
Thank you. Honor, brother.
Hey, guys. Thanks for listening to the podcast. My name is Colin Krieger, and my day job is real estate. If you're looking to buy or sell, I'd love to talk to you. Or if you just want to sit and talk real estate in a no-pressure situation, I'd love to help you. I work with RE/MAX Partners in Starkville, Columbus, and West Point, Mississippi. I can help you find an agent anywhere in Mississippi or anywhere in the country. Just reach out to our office at 662-327-7705 or find me anywhere when you type in 662-329-SOLD.